before oil, before gold, there was a color that quietly ruled empires. History often tells us that wealth comes from what we can touch. Metals, land, resources pulled from the earth. And for centuries that seemed true. But the real power in one forgotten chapter of history came from something far less obvious. A deep, hypnotic blue. So rare, so desired that in some places it was worth more than silver. This wasn't just a color. It wasn't just a dye used to stain cloth. It was a system that reached into villages and fields. A system that controlled farmers without chains. A system that moved money across continents and quietly funded entire empires. And yet today, almost no one talks about it. No one asks how a simple color could reshape economies, or why millions of lives were tied to something as fragile as a plant. So what was this blue, and how did it come to control so much of the world? To understand that, we have to go back. At first glance, indigo looks harmless, just a pigment pulled from plants, a natural color pressed into fabric, fading slowly with time. Nothing about it feels powerful. Nothing about it suggests control. But behind that deep blue, there was something far more complex. An invisible network, carefully built, quietly expanded. It connected distant farms to global markets, linked small farmers to powerful merchants, and tied entire regions to a single purpose. This wasn't accidental wealth. It wasn't luck or simple demand. It was engineered. Every step, from planning to processing to trade, was controlled, not always with force, but with design. A system that created dependency. A system that made escape almost impossible. And that's what made indigo so powerful. Because the real value was never just the color itself. It was the structure behind it. The flow of goods, money, and influence moving quietly beneath the surface. To understand how empires rose on something so simple, we have to look beyond the blue and into the system that carried it across the world. Long before factories dominated production, global trade was already taking shape, not with machines, but with patterns. Regions began to specialize. Some grew spices, others mined metals, and some cultivated crops the rest of the world could not produce. Trade routes stretched across continents and oceans, slow, unpredictable, but powerful. And something interesting started to happen. Demand began to travel faster than goods themselves. A product could become valuable in a distant land long before it ever arrived there. Stories spread, markets reacted, prices rose on expectation alone. And in this early global system, indigo found its place. It grew best in tropical regions, warm climates, rich soil, specific conditions that could not be easily replicated elsewhere. But its demand came from far away, from textile centers, from growing cities, from societies that craved deep, lasting color in their fabrics. Blue was not easy to produce, not stable, not cheap, which made indigo rare. And rarity creates value. But the real story wasn't just about where indigo was grown or where it was used. It was about the space in between, the gap between supply and desire. Because in that gap, opportunity begins to form. And where opportunity exists, control soon follows. And that's where this story takes a darker turn. Indigo wasn't easy to produce. It demanded land. It demanded labor. And most of all, it demanded time. The plant had to be grown carefully, harvested at the right moment, processed through long, exhausting steps just to extract its color. It was slow work, unforgiving work. And the people who carried that burden were the farmers. They worked the fields. They took the risks. They gave their time, their energy, their survival. But they rarely saw the profits. Because the real challenge was never just growing indigo. It was controlling everything around it. Who supplied the seeds, who financed the crops, who processed the dye, who transported it across oceans, and most importantly, who sold it in distant markets. Each step added value. Each step created distance between the producer and the profit, and the further that distance grew, the less power the farmer had. This is where the system revealed its true nature, because whoever controlled that chain didn't just sell a product. They controlled prices. They controlled supply. They controlled entire regions without ever owning them directly. Indigo wasn't just a crop anymore. It became leverage. And once that leverage was understood, the system began to expand in ways no one could easily escape. The real innovation wasn't in farming. It wasn't about better seeds or faster ways to grow the crop. The breakthrough was something far less visible. It was structure, a carefully designed system where every step was connected. Production, pricing, distribution, each one controlled, each one aligned. Nothing was left to chance. At the center of this system, new power players began to rise. Middlemen, not farmers, not consumers, but the ones in between. They didn't grow indigo. They didn't wear it, but they controlled its journey. They financed crops before they were planted. They locked farmers into agreements before the harvest even began. They set prices long before the product reached the market. Contracts replaced choice. Farmers no longer decided what to grow. They followed instructions. And with every agreement, the balance of risk began to shift. Up the chain, profits became more stable, predictable, scalable. Down the chain, uncertainty grew. If crops failed, farmers paid the price. If markets dropped, farmers absorbed the loss. The system protected itself by pushing risk downward. This wasn't trade in its simplest form anymore. It wasn't two sides exchanging value. It was a mechanism, a calculated structure designed to extract value at scale. And once it proved successful, it didn't stay small for long. In regions like India and the Caribbean, this system took its most complete form. What began as trade turned into control. Fields that once grew food for survival were now forced to grow indigo for export. Farmers didn't always choose this shift. They were pulled into it through debt, through contracts they barely understood, through pressure that left little room to refuse. Season after season, the cycle repeated. Plant indigo, harvest it, sell it under fixed terms, and then start again, often deeper in debt than before. Escape became almost impossible because the system wasn't built for balance. It was built for continuity. And far away from these fields, merchants and colonial powers sat at the top of the chain. They didn't touch the soil. They didn't face the risks of weather or failure, but they set the rules. They decided what was grown. They controlled how it was priced. And they determined where the profits would flow. Distance became an advantage. The further power was from the land, the easier it was to maintain control without resistance. And the results were clear. This wasn't just about making money.
Your body doesn't separate sleep habits from real life. It carries them forward into how you move, sit, and feel during the day, which means the real problem isn't one bad night. It's hundreds of normal nights quietly shaping your body in the background without you ever noticing. So the next time you lie down, don't just chase comfort. Pause for a second. Notice how your body settles, the angle of your neck, the position of your spine, the way you breathe, because the position you choose tonight might quietly decide how you feel tomorrow and far beyond that. And here's the shift most people miss. Small adjustments don't feel dramatic in the moment, but over time they compound. Better alignment, more mindful positioning, tiny corrections that your body builds on night after night. Not instantly, but consistently. And that's the real power of sleep. It's not just about getting enough. It's about getting it right. Because once you fix what happens in those silent hours, you don't just wake up rested. You wake up better.